Hi, I'm Mars Marsh, and today I'll be presenting on the maturation of adolescent males, understanding youth fundamental skill and strength training. Here's a brief contents of what we'll be covering today. Please take a look. So, an overview of maturation. Maturation is the process of children growing into adulthood, indicating physiological, hormonal, anatomical, cognitive, and social adaptations. This is typically focused on the adolescent phase, or the growth spurt, as Millward will explain. How do we measure it? The gold standard of measurement is considered peak height velocity, and this is considered the gold standard because it's non-invasive and takes a lot into consideration, like gender, date of birth, height, weight, and so forth. Its relation to hormones, degrees of height variation, sex differences, and bone development are also very important and help tailor measurements to the individual. Why should we measure it? Long-term athlete development, youth development models, periods of accelerated adaptation, a focus on fundamental movement skills, and enabling us to better look at dose-response relationships suitable for individuals. Wider considerations are, we are working with pediatric populations, so ethics are of great concern and consideration. So, peak height velocity, quantifying maturation. Peak height velocity is widely accepted as the maximum velocity of growth for adolescents, or the growth spurt. You can see from this chart the average estimates for PHV in girls and boys, with boys typically occurring just before the ages of 14. In their assessment of peak height velocity, Millward et al. Through anthropometric measurement states that practical measurement to match youth athletes is possible, it's non-invasive, and it correlates to hormonal, mainly androgen testosterone changes, and it accounts for sex differences. To calculate PHV, the following data is used: gender, date of birth, date of measurement, standing height, sitting height, and weight. Why would we use it? Well, the main reasons are it may equalize competition, it may reduce incidence of injury, and it may enhance chances for success. And it helps to aid the strength and conditioning coaches and sports scientists in adapting training prescriptions and cycles around the individual. This is highly important because peak height velocity, although these estimates are there, it can occur at different points and different stages for each individual. Impacts on training and performance. Dobbs et al. Did a back assessment 4-week training intervention on pre and post PHV individuals. The back squat assessment showed how motor competency pre-PHV had greater effect, likely due to less trained status. Dose-response relationships were proven effective for the S in strength and conditioning, and this helps inform practitioners and coaches how we can go about creating youth athlete programs and training programs and specialize them to help also avoid injury. Early specialization was shown to be injury inducive, so a better focus may be on mixed sports practices and fundamental movement skills. Dobbs et al. In a 4-week back squat assessment training intervention also showed the positive effects on pre and post PHV, but there was a greater improvement in the pre-HV population. This was likely due to neurological adaptations and their less trained status. It did, however, use an elite athlete population, so this led to a high chance of bias within the research. And future research should aim to be more inclusive of untrained and trained individuals and separate the two, and also find correlations between this. Training programs itself may have had the greatest effect over maturation principles. Key points to take note of are that training pre and post PHV are both effective, and that dose-response relationship seems very effective, and that it should be monitored in order to prevent and reduce injury risk in youth athletes that can also lead to bigger injury risk later in their careers. And fundamental movement skills like squatting, jumping, throwing, and running are highly important. So, the effects of resistance training on fundamental movement skills in youth. Collins et al. Did a review on the effect of resistance training interventions on fundamental movement skills in youth through a meta-analysis. The results are displayed here. The resistance training showed that it has positive effects on fundamental movement skills, i.e. sprint, standing long jump, squat jump, throw, and vertical jump in untrained youth. The review concludes that resistance training has impact on indicators of fundamental movement skills, and that in reverse, fundamental movement skills play a large role in the development of future resistance training programs. but a need for further research on the role resistance training plays in the development of fundamental movement skills needs to be researched. A focus of resistance training interventions should focus on process, e.g. jump height, and product-orientated, for example, movement skill battery outcomes. This can help tailor programs again to the individuals, where they're at in their maturity status, and how we can best move forward with them as individuals. Previous studies of notable contemporary research, like the Sinsky, Priest, and Grenish's 2016 systematic review, showed once again that dose-response relationships are very effective for resistance programs. Focusing on fewer reps and higher intensities was the key to this. However, these previous studies likely contained a lot of bias where candidates consisted solely of athletes and athletic populations. So the key findings are that resistance training has positive effects on both trained and untrained use. The dose-response relationships are important, and resistance training has a positive effect on fundamental movement skills. So need for further research is necessary. Long-term athlete development. This model here by Lloyd and Oliver is a great example. Their youth physical development model they've created shows it in larger font where we can time certain attributes to focus on in our youth athletes, like physical qualities such as mobility, agility, speed, power, and strength. It also has a good emphasis on fundamental movement skills, especially through early childhood and middle childhood, also continuing through adolescence and the PHV phase. The biggest thing to note here is that in terms of resistance training, again, strength training in youth athletes, hypertrophy, strength could always be a focus, but hypertrophy training specifically shouldn't really occur until the PHV phase, when more hormones in males like testosterone kick in. There it expresses, again, the need for individualization of the model should not be underestimated when dealing with athletes of different sex, maturity status, and training history. Previous models focused on characterization of elite performance by chronological age and age groupings, and this isn't as effective, again, as focusing on the individual and where they can be on the maturity scale. As we've said, PHV in general, males occurring before 14, this is an estimate, and different individuals can occur these changes, especially hormonally, at different times, and this is what we need to be aware of and focus upon to best support each individual. The updated long-term athlete development model is great because it also presents a logical, evidence-based approach to male youth development and can be a great tool for coaches to follow. Strength training has been shown to be protective for injuries, including overuse injuries. And by following a structured model like this, we can also help to mitigate that, with also placing the importance that we need to let kids be kids and adapt training to them and not the other way around. Hence the focus on fundamental movement skills through early childhood and middle childhood. And then we can switch a focus to more individualized training later on. So the practical implications, to summarize our findings, dose-response relationships have been shown in resistance training programs to help enhance fundamental movement skills through motor performance gains. A combination of fundamental movement skills, dose-response relationship, and resistance training seems complementary pre, during, and post peak height velocity, and is likely to lead to greater athletic capability in adulthood. Fundamental movement skills are strongly being related to increased physical activity in childhood and into adulthood, and may complement resistance training during PHV and decrease injury risks. Injury surveillance of youth athletes is important for long-term injury prevention and development. Dose-response relationships, fundamental movement skills, and resistance training seem to create a trifecta for strength and conditioning coaches and sports scientists, enabling to better adapt training prescriptions and cycles. Taking the individual again into consideration is of utmost importance and where they're at in their maturation status. Ethical considerations around youth athlete groupings, early specialization, and needs for more attention, and research to avoid dropout and make competition fairer is important. Overall, more research is required within these fields of youth athlete development, with a focus being on dose-response relationship, fundamental movement skills, and resistance training, and when and where to implement them. Thank you very much for listening. Here are my references.